So another thing that always happens in every industry is that you'll have delays. So our product was supposed to show up 2 weeks before I was having my planned C-section, and it didn't show up in my garage until the day before. And so I had this huge pallet in my garage. I couldn't actually drive my car into the garage. I was living in San Francisco at the time. So I'm like, I want to get this thing out of here. And, before I bring child number 4 home. And so that's when he said, okay, fine, we'll go to Whole Foods and I'll carry the 10 cases in, and I'll, you'll pitch it to the guy that you had talked to. I mean, this was a fake it until you make it moment, sort of. I think I sort of got my husband to believe that I was maybe further along in terms of actually selling it into Whole Foods than I actually was. Because I had conversations with them, and he was like, okay, well, is he waiting for you? I didn't even know if he was working that day. Like, I just said, yeah, come on, we'll go, like, it'll be fine. So we get there and I see him in the beverage aisle, and he's, stocking the shelves. And that's when I said, hey, remember me? And he turned around and he said, you are so pregnant. And I said, I am pregnant. And he said, so when you're not going to deliver in my store, are you? And I said, I hopefully not, but I'm supposed to have my baby this afternoon at 2:00. So I really hope it doesn't come sooner. And he said, how do you know that you're having a baby at 2:00? And so my husband had been around me long enough to know that I would probably take this opportunity to sort of share my story of why I knew that I was having a planned C-section. So poor guy, he starts backing up into the fruits and vegetables section, thought, oh my God, I can't even believe she's going to talk to this kid about, he's like 25-year-old guy who's like, wants to get educated on a planned C-section. So he went on to ask me the difference between a emergency C-section and a planned C-section. And of course, I also talked to him about a vaginal delivery. And like I said, has anyone ever talked to you about any of this? And so 15 minutes later, that's when he said, I really appreciate you taking the time to educate me on this. And, and good luck with delivering the baby this afternoon. And I said, wait, time out. Like, can we actually go back to why I'm here? I would love it if you would put my product on the shelf. And he said, well, I'll try. And I'm trying to convince him. And my husband had come back at this point. And he said, Kara, stop selling. Like, just come on, let's go. Like, he'll do it if he can, kind of thing. And I was like, okay. So I went and delivered Justin without actually knowing whether or not this was like actually going to be happening at Whole Foods. And then the next day, right. Bad. I mean, the delivery was fine, but I would have preferred to actually see the products go on the shelf, but I didn't get that opportunity. But then the next day he called me and he said, the product is gone. And I said, who took it? Like, I hadn't thought through as far as this, the idea that people would actually buy the product. Like, I had just thought through, let me just get it on the shelf. And now, like, he's telling me that the 10 cases are gone. And so we checked out of the hospital, just like getting your check at a restaurant, I guess. It was like, wait, we got to go. I got to get to Whole Foods. And so, when you have a planned C-section, you get 3 days in the hospital. And yeah, I said, after a day, I said, I'm out. I gotta go. Like, I've done this a lot of times. And so we went home, and that's when my husband wouldn't let me actually go to Whole Foods to even see the product on the shelf. Well, I guess it was all gone at that point. And he said, let me deliver the product. And actually, the funnier, not the funnier, but an extension of that story was when he came home, he said he stopped at FedEx Kinko's because everybody was asking him for a business card. And he was a Silicon Valley lawyer. and hadn't really had business cards. And so he was working inside of Netscape, and he had left Netscape and was doing a medical startup. But I said, "Oh, really? You stopped at FedEx Kinko's and you got some business cards?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "How does this sound? I'm the chief operating officer of Hint Water." Can you imagine? I could imagine you saying that, guy, like something like he just thought it was so funny that he was like hauling cases in his like Grand Cherokee for his wife. And he was like, "I'm the chief operating officer." And he's still the chief operating officer 15 years later.
And how many employees do you have now?
About a little over 200. Yeah. So he's, but he, I think for him, he's the son of a doctor, who for years he was hearing frustrations that his dad had with, trying to really help diagnose patients and help get them better. And then the patients would go home, and he would know, he wouldn't know whether or not they did what he said to do. Right. And it was just like this frustration. And again, he had worked on this medical information systems company that was helping diagnose patients better through a patient interview, way ahead of its time, almost 18 years ago now. And that's when he said, this is so simple, it's almost crazy. Like, you do not have experience as a nutritionist. You are not a doctor, and you're telling people just go drink water and you'll change your health for like, a little more than $1 a bottle. You're like telling people just go do this and like their health will change. He was like, it's so crazy. It actually might work. And you may actually not only disrupt an industry, but you may actually help people get the most important thing back, which is their health. Right. And so so that's what he saw in this. And again, also saw I was way ahead of where most consumers were. And so while he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do, he said, "I'll just help you. I'll load up the Grand Cherokee, and you can stay in the car, or I'll stay in the car while the babies are in the baby seats." And, but, we not only had plenty of Silicon Valley people laughing at me saying, "Wait, what are you doing? Why aren't you taking a job at some of these tech firms? And you want to start a beverage company?" But we were at this point the insane couple, right? Because he's a Silicon Valley attorney having offers, thrown at him. And he was like, "No, I think my wife might be losing it. I'm not sure, but she's writing huge checks off of our personal bank account for like bottles and caps. And she gets excited when like she figures out that caps are not called caps, they're called closures." And, and it's like, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I figured something out today." It make like the whole, once you know the vocabulary, like the world is just like your oyster. And so that's when he said, "I really want to jump in here." And cause you're just having a good time doing it, but it's also just fun. And it'd be really fun to do this together.